Why is solitude the ultimate test of your life? Think about it carefully. It's not success, it's not money, it's not anyone's approval. The real line that separates the strong from the weak lies in that moment when you're left alone with yourself and have no escape. Most people run from it because solitude is like a cruel mirror. It shows you who you are, without ornaments, without masks, without excuses. And when you look for too long, you discover truths you'd rather bury. Solitude isn't comfortable. It isn't kind. It isn't indulgent. It's a judge who won't buy your excuses and an executioner who won't forget your lies. That's why most fear it, because it strips away the false skin they wear every day. Do you know what the irony is? That same silence you fear today is the door to the greatest freedom you'll ever have. Solitude is the place where your mind stops being a hostage to external noise and finally begins to hear itself. It's the arena where your fear turns into clarity, where your weakness becomes strength, where you finally stop being a slave to what people will say and start becoming the owner of yourself. And I'm going to promise you something with absolute clarity. If you stay until the end of this video, you'll understand why solitude is neither a punishment nor a flaw, but the most decisive exam of your life, and how overcoming it makes you free, indestructible, and authentic. Most believe solitude is simply the absence of people, but that's a convenient lie. True solitude doesn't begin when you lack company, but when you discover that even surrounded by people, you still feel empty. That's where the mirage breaks. You can have friends, a partner, family, thousands of contacts in your phone. But when you close your eyes and turn off the lights, only your own voice remains. And if that voice doesn't hold you, the whole world won't be enough. This is the trap no one wants to admit. Social noise doesn't cure inner silence, it only disguises it. And here comes a secret almost no one dares to confess. The most dangerous bond you can have is with the approval of others. Because when you haven't learned to be at peace with yourself, every smile, every applause, every kind word becomes a dose of borrowed oxygen. You become an emotional beggar, always waiting for someone else to fill the emptiness you don't know how to inhabit. But there's something even more disturbing. That dependence robs you of the only thing you have, your inner freedom. Every time you live to not disappoint, every time you mold your gestures and ideas to be accepted, you're mortgaging your identity. And you do it out of fear of an imaginary enemy, solitude. Do you realize what this means? That while you run from solitude, it chases you like a shadow. You can avoid it for a while, but it always ends up finding you. And when it does, if you weren't prepared, it destroys you. Because solitude unmasks the imposter. It shows you how many of your dreams were truly yours and how many were borrowed. It reveals to what extent you've built a life with bricks you didn't choose, following blueprints others drew. But here's the brutal part. That same solitude that seems like an executioner is, in reality, the only teacher capable of revealing the truth. If you manage to bear its weight, it teaches you something no crowd can give you: authenticity. And here begins the silent transformation. Because the one who learns to enjoy their own company stops being vulnerable to abandonment, stops fearing rejection, stops needing. They become someone so solid that when they open up to others, they do it by choice, not by lack. And that completely changes the quality of their relationships. They no longer relate to fill a void, but to share an overflow. Don't you see? Solitude is the filter that separates real relationships from illusory ones. Whoever doesn't know how to be alone seeks company to numb themselves. Whoever has made peace with their solitude seeks company to create. And that's the point where everything makes sense. Solitude isn't the end, it's the test. Overcoming it doesn't mean locking yourself away from the world. It means entering it with a new perspective, with new strength, with new freedom. And I want you to think about this right now. How much of your life is directed by your own desires, and how much is conditioned by the fear of being alone? The answer is uncomfortable, I know, but when you discover it, you'll have the key that very few possess. And if you stay, I'm going to show you how that key opens the door that most never dare to cross, the door to true emotional independence. The question you should be asking isn't how to escape solitude, but what you're willing to discover when you lock yourself in it. Because solitude is like a dark room. At first you can't see anything, you feel uncomfortable. You feel like the unknown lurks in the corners. But if you have patience, your eyes adjust and you begin to perceive shapes that were hidden before. That's the real power of solitude. At first it seems like an enemy, then it becomes a flashlight that reveals everything you had hidden from yourself. Look closely. Human beings spend most of their lives running from what they can't avoid. They run from silence by filling their days with noise. They run from introspection with cheap entertainment. They run from themselves seeking validation in others. And the most tragic thing is that while they run, their life slips through their fingers. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Solitude is inevitable. Sooner or later, when the mask falls, when the lights go out, when the applause stops, you're left alone with yourself. And that's where everything is decided. Think about this. Why did the great thinkers, artists, visionaries of history seek solitude as if it were a temple? Because they understood that only in that state could they clearly hear what the crowd silenced. Leonardo da Vinci disappeared for years into his notebooks. Nietzsche walked alone through the forests until his feet were worn. Kafka wrote at dawn while everyone slept. These weren't whims, it was survival. Solitude gave them access to a level of creativity and lucidity that no banal conversation could offer. And now that we've made it this far, before we continue, I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price. With that said, let's continue with the video. The crowd entertains, but silence transforms. And now I'll throw you another truth that may unsettle you. If you can't bear solitude, it means you still can't bear your own mind. That's the hardest blow. Because what you're rejecting isn't the silence, but the inner voices that appear within it. Your insecurities, your failures, your regrets, your fear of not being enough. All of that surfaces when no one is there to distract you. And that's why you run. That's why you seek company even if it adds nothing. That's why you take refuge in empty conversations or bright screens. But tell me, how long will you keep numbing yourself? Solitude is a psychological laboratory. There your wounds are revealed, but so are your antidotes. When you manage to stay at peace with yourself without running away, you discover something terrifying and fascinating at the same time. That you were never broken, you were just scared. Your anxiety didn't come from being alone, but from not having met yourself yet. And as soon as you begin to observe yourself calmly, your mind stops being a cage and becomes a workshop. There you can polish your thoughts, organize your emotions, shape your vision of the world. Imagine this. One day you wake up and realize you no longer need to fill your emptiness with anyone, that your own company is enough, that your thoughts are a refuge and not a sentence. That day, everything changes, because you no longer seek love out of need, but out of choice. You no longer accept toxic friendships out of fear of the void, but you choose with precision who deserves to enter your space. That day, solitude stops being a punishment and becomes a privilege. And this is where the truly disturbing part comes in. Society doesn't want you to discover this power, because a person who has made peace with their solitude is not manipulable. They don't need the approval of a group. They can't be bought with cheap praise. They can't be controlled with fear of rejection. That person has already passed the test. And someone like that is free, untamable, unpredictable. That's frightening, because we live in a world designed to keep you dependent, always seeking something or someone to calm your anxiety. Now ask yourself, what would happen if one day everyone discovered this secret? If millions of people learned to be at peace with themselves without begging for attention or recognition? It would be a collapse for the system, because a human being who doesn't fear being alone is a human being impossible to enslave. Do you see how deep this goes? Solitude isn't just the ultimate test of your life, it's also the path to the only freedom no one can take from you. And I want to take you one step further. Think about how your relationship with others transforms when you no longer need anything from them. Fear disappears, anxiety dies, sick attachment breaks, and then something almost no one experiences arises: genuine love. Because true love is born only when there's no dependency. You can only truly love when you lack nothing, when you choose to share what already overflows within you, not when you expect someone to fix your fractures. Look at it from this perspective. Solitude is the crucible in which emotional maturity is forged. There, need melts away, intention is purified, will is tempered. The result is a complete human being, capable of walking alone and at the same time capable of extending a hand to others from a place of abundance and not of lack. It's a dark tunnel, yes. But at the end of that tunnel is your freedom. And as promised, if you stay with me until the end, I'm going to show you how this journey is not only bearable, but enjoyable. Because whoever crosses the fire of solitude is reborn with a power the rest of the world doesn't even suspect exists. Do you want me to continue developing from here toward an even more psychological focus, showing how solitude reveals hidden traumas and at the same time opens paths to creativity and purpose? The fascinating thing is that solitude not only strips you bare before yourself, it also functions as a kind of magnifying glass that amplifies what you really carry inside. When you're with others, you can pretend, you can distract yourself, you can act, you can cover your emptiness with others' presence. But when you're alone, the theater ends. Solitude doesn't tolerate characters. It demands authenticity. And that's why so many fear it, because they've spent their lives playing a role and suddenly discover that without an audience they don't know who they are. Here's where the darkest and most interesting part begins. Solitude is an internal lie detector. If it hurts to be with yourself, it's because you can't stand yourself. If silence unsettles you, it's because you know there are truths inside you're trying to bury. Every thought you pushed down to avoid facing it comes back in the echo of the void, and there's no escape. That's what makes solitude the ultimate test. It not only confronts your present, it also forces you to look at your past and recognize your invisible chains. But don't misunderstand it, because here's the paradox. The more uncomfortable it feels, the more necessary it is. If the simple act of spending an afternoon alone makes you anxious, it means you've built your identity on fragile foundations. And here comes the brutal part. As long as you don't resolve that discomfort, you'll remain vulnerable to everything and everyone. Because any person, any situation, any rejection will be enough to break you. Solitude is like psychological training. The more you practice it, the stronger you become. Think about it. Isn't it strange that what we fear most is also what we most need? Solitude is the gym of the soul. In it, you learn to manage anxiety, to regulate your emotions, to build an internal dialogue that doesn't sink you, but sustains you. Without solitude, there's never real introspection. And without introspection, all you do is repeat inherited patterns, react like an automaton programmed by social noise. And here's another secret almost no one mentions. Solitude sharpens your senses. In the silence, you begin to hear clearly, not only what happens inside you, but what happens outside. You see details you used to miss, you perceive hidden intentions in people, you detect falseness in gestures. Because when you learn to decipher yourself, it becomes impossible not to decipher others as well. The one who knows how to be alone becomes a privileged observer, and that advantage is enormous in a world where almost everyone lives distracted. Look at the irony of all this. Many seek company to feel alive, when in reality, true vitality is born in silence. The moment you sit in solitude and, instead of running away, start to listen, is the moment you stop being a spectator of your life and become its protagonist. Because that's where clarity arises. There are born the decisions that change destinies, the ideas that break molds, the strength you never suspected you had. And do you know what's most intriguing? That solitude, well lived, doesn't isolate you. It connects you. Yes, you heard that right. Because only when you're at peace with yourself can you truly connect with others. Before that, you only seek to use people as crutches. But when you learn to be alone, you no longer need crutches. Then each bond becomes an act of freedom and not of dependence. And that's the difference between living entangled in toxic relationships and living surrounded by relationships that truly add to your life. I want you to understand it with an image. Most people approach others like emotional beggars with an empty bowl in their hand, waiting for someone to fill it. The one who has conquered solitude, on the other hand, arrives with the bowl overflowing and offers. Can you imagine how everything changes